Contrary to the image so often reproduced by cinema and literature, the Middle Ages was a world brimming with colour. Both in peace and war, colour always had a prominent role, but unlike today, when choosing a colour or another, no one did it at random or by personal taste, because as we will see, each colour had its symbolism. But let's start at the beginning. Why was colour so important in the Middle Ages? There are several reasons, but there is a very simple one. The vast majority of people did not know how to read, and consequently, colour played a very important role. It is easier to identify colours in images than letters, and the medieval people used both elements to launch certain messages, sometimes political, sometimes with religious motives, and sometimes for military purposes. Without going any further, each noble house in each dynasty was identified with certain colours that they wore on their robes and flags. Often, when a knight became a vassal of another lord, he took as his own the colours of that lord, and from then on he wore them both in his domains and on the battlefields, which were rarely so impregnated with colour as at the end of the Middle Ages. Recall, for example, the great banner that Richard the Lionheart carried with his colours, and which indicated where the king was during the heat of the battle, and beyond the king, the soldiers even painted their helmets in metal. The very nature of feudal society necessitated the presence of colour. So weak was the social and economic structure that in the end, the power of a nobleman or king depended only on his charisma and personal strength. The most powerful was the one who managed to attract more bonds of loyalty to his person. From the army to political alliances, everything rested on shifting bonds of loyalty. As a result, both tried to reinforce their unstable power through great ceremonies and rites. Kings organised impressive coronation ceremonies to reinforce their claim to the throne, and lords orchestrated complex acts of homage to reinforce their power over their vassals. In the former, even the streets were dressed with banners, flags and floral arches. In the latter, the code of chivalry was manifest in the brilliant display of armour and military protocols. Medieval society was the society of gesture, of exaggerated ceremony and ritual. Never were the ritual celebrations of the church so spectacular, nor the popular festivities so bombastic. Processions, parades, and jousting reflect very well the importance of the visual component, and all this together made the medieval world a multicoloured world. The medieval people even painted the churches and castles, which were periodically whitewashed. These monumental constructions were never made of bare stone as they appear in the movies. Each of the figures that decorated the capitals and the portals of the churches were painted in bright colours: red, blue, green, yellow. Inside these temples, also the naves were completely covered with colourful biblical scenes, while the apse above the altar was painted simulating the celestial vault, with an infinity of stars on a blue background. In this sense, the great historian Jacques Le Goff said that the Romanesque was, in reality, the Baroque of the Middle Ages. Castles, for their part, were whitewashed and sometimes painted. There were never those austere grey and dark buildings of which so much has been said. In the vibrant light of candles and torches, those temples and castles, lined with carpets and tapestries, and covered with wall paintings and reliefs, would seem to us today like psychedelic scenes. The medieval people filled everything with colour, even the margins of the legislative codes, which were illuminated with precious miniatures in full colour. In short, for them, the visual was so powerful that their world and their mentalities could not be conceived without the omnipresence of colour. The surprising effort of the medieval people to fill everything with colour speaks to us of their fear of darkness, which they related to darkness and the devil. They were looking for colour and light because they were looking for God, and God is light, whose essence they tried to capture in those cathedrals in which the colourful stained glass windows were gaining more and more space to the stone. And what about dress? In this field, the importance of colour acquired an enormous importance, given that to the symbolism of each colour, we must add its high economic value. We must not forget the costly work of making the colours and the process of dyeing the fabrics, arduous work that was done in workshops located on the outskirts of the cities, such as the tanneries. The choice of colour in clothing was so important that in the 15th century, the Herald of Sicily wrote a guide on the meaning of colours. In the Middle Ages, purple remained a colour exclusive to the elites, as it had been in antiquity, although a new purple was created from a lichen called orchilla. Purple was a colourful and difficult to obtain, which made fabrics very expensive. For this reason, it was the colour of the powerful. It is no coincidence that the cardinals, who were the most powerful men in the church, dressed entirely in purple, from their shoes to their capelet, which was the hat from which the tasselled cords hung. All the cardinal's clothing was of a vivid purple colour. It represented his sacrifice for the church, but also his enormous power and wealth. In fact, the incipient medieval bourgeoisie, in their eagerness to match the odd blood nobility, liked to appear at ceremonies wearing elegant red or purple silk robes. One of the most valued colours of the Middle Ages was blue. It was, moreover, a shade difficult to obtain and therefore expensive. It was made from azurite, aeronite, lapis lazuli and indigo. Blue was related to fidelity and honour, and from the 12th century it was the colour of the Virgin Mary's mantle, a reference at the time. For all these reasons, it was a very common colour among noble women, and also among the great houses, such as that of the houses of France. Green, on the other hand, was the colour of hope or new love. Precisely for this reason, a famous medieval poet was indignant when he dreamed that his partner appeared wearing a green dress. In the Middle Ages, the colour white had a special significance as a symbol of purity. The Cistercians, who emerged as a response to the enrichment of the Cluny order, characterised by their black habits, opted to take the white habit, thus signalling their observance, purity and humility. They were known as the White Monks. Unlike many other religious orders, the Templars also chose the white habit for their purity and chastity, while the cross showed their religious character and the red colour of the cross their sacrifice for God and their people. As opposed to white, yellow was on many occasions a colour loaded with negative connotations. It is not surprising that Jews were forced to wear a yellow cloth insignia on their clothes, or that jesters and prostitutes used this colour to be identified, or to be noticed. We could say in short that the colour as well as the quality of the fabrics gave category and personality to the individual, while among the humble there was an abundance of cream, white and brown wool and leather. Among the nobles, red, blue and green silks and velvet stood out. Finally, the role of colours in noble coats of arms, so present in medieval times, deserves a special mention. In the world of heraldry, each colour had its meaning and its particular name, the main ones being red or gules, yellow or gold, which in heraldry represented power and purity, blue or azure, white or silver, and black or sable. To give three known examples, the arms of the Plantagenets were composed of lions passant of gold on a field of gules. The arms of the kings of Aragon were clubs of gules on a field of gold. And the arms of the famous white companies of Beltran du Guesclin were formed by two-headed eagles of sable on a field of silver. And this is the end of the video, like a great night at the theatre introducing the main protagonists. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment about what other character, battle, event, or historical curiosity you would like us to cover. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as we did. See you in a few days. Bye!